My experience of living in a monastery, so my first experience actually was at Nalanda, where I was for 11 years in the south of France. It was a nice community, very nice community. There was usually, how I remember it, is maybe like 15 of us most of the time, sometimes less, sometimes more. There was always a problem with getting the monks to go to the morning puja. So occasionally, Gentecho would be persuaded by the director at the time to give us a pep talk. And his advice was very good, actually, which was encourage us to cultivate the attitude that when you go to the morning puja, you're doing your practice. So what that means is that however many people are there, even if you're the only teacher, which I mean, I used to miss puja probably as much, if not more than anybody else, but now and then I would go and I would be the only one there. So it's like you would do the practice and it's like, oh, this is my practice, this is not just something I'm having to do with other people because it's some kind of burden, but it's my practice, this is my practice. We all had to do some work around the center, and we used to take it in turns cooking. I used to make a good apple crumble, and I'd have to do pound cakes. Yeah, besides that, it was basically rice and dal and whatever vegetables there were. After class, several of us, when the weather permitted, which we usually did, we'd go for a bike ride. But, for sure, there was some serious study that went on. So that was very good anyway. I mean, that was wonderful for sure. Then, of course, Sera was very different. I mean, I already had learned Tibetan, but, not that good. I mean, I was translating. My last 3 or maybe 4 years at Nalanda, I was translating for Gentecho. But then, going to Sera, that was a big boost in terms of, becoming more comfortable with the language and the terms and so on. The debate, the studies, and just, like everything was in Tibetan. Everything. I can't remember what time in the morning things started. I mean, it could have been 6. So what happens is, the gong they will hit the gong. And basically, so they hit the gong, and then ages later hit it again, and then gradually the intervals come shorter and shorter and shorter, and it goes, at the end it goes ding, 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 ding. And at the end of that third one at the end, everybody should be seated, and that's when the chant starts, the chant up. And you'd be served with, one of the first things is you'd be served with bread and tea, Tibetan tea, which I really used to like. So it was a very nice breakfast anyway. Just to give you an idea, when Gentecho was made abbot, so he had to go to all of the pujas. If you're abbot, you have to go to all the pujas. I remember him saying it's just like being a new monk, having to go to all the pujas. So you get the idea that there's sort of like the older monks make the new monks go to the puja, but they stay back in their room. So that was usually, so people would mostly have their lunch around like 11:30, then afternoons go to classes. Classes you have less and less as the years go by. Like when you're a new monk, then you would, go to a class every day. You'd have class every day. And you needed that, because that's where you'd learn what things you needed to debate, and you go and debate those. And then as time went by, you would get less and less classes. Depending upon, there are different schedules according to different. There's a sort of debate schedule where sometimes you've got debate in the morning and in the evening. The main thing is the evenings. Sometimes there wouldn't be debate in the evening at the main courtyard, but they would still take place in the kamsens, the smaller groups, monastic grouping. So you debate for a while, then everybody gets together to do prayers, like mainly Tara Heart Sutra, Kalini So do that, and then debate again. And for the newer monks, they might even be debating up till midnight. I never had the energy to do that. I kind of get tired and I go in my room. And then the monks would usually go back really starving, hungry after all that brain work kind of thing. And actually, it's quite physical, of course. I don't know if you've seen the monks debating. It's quite funny, actually. It's very nice. Also, debate is the most amazing way to learn, that's for sure. When you learn to debate, actually, that's when you learn to study. That's how you learn how to read a text and investigate and question. Because you begin to apply the kind of way of going into things and questioning things which is the life of debate. You're thinking about what point of view is this? Who is this aimed at? What's the purpose of this? All sorts of very interesting questions which kind of like really open things up and bring a great deal of clarity and understanding. One of the most amazing things that I never expected when I first went was the bond that develops between oneself and one's classmates. Whenever I think of those monks in particular, it's just like this feeling of joy to think about them, to see them. You feel like you want to hug them. You feel, like this just quite very strong emotional thing. Very strong bond, very deep. Because these are the people that you learned with. Because they usually say 25% of what you end up knowing is from your teacher, classes, 25% from your own personal studies, 50% from discussing with your friends, so classmates in that case. So really, like if you come away with something that you really value from those years of study in the monastery, then you know that it's because of them. I think this is something that can be replicated in Western Dharma centers, and even though somehow it happened very naturally at Sera, nobody told me that I should think about my classmates in something that developed just naturally. And I got this idea from listening to the Koban Kerimshe. I've been translating him during the last few years on Zoom. The idea is, if you think about the nature of cyclic existence, the suffering nature, terrible nature really of cyclic existence, and when you think about where that suffering comes from, which not really understanding the nature of reality is because of mistaken kind of like fantasized ways of understanding of what the way things really are. So when you discover that that's the situation I'm in, that kind of samsara, so cyclic existence, all of the misery that's brought about by this ignorance, that confusion, and the way to free myself from that confusion and therefore free myself from all suffering is by cultivating wisdom. And that the way that I cultivate wisdom can only be by studying. When you understand that, now the key, so that I won't ever have to suffer anymore. And in fact, the key to also like ultimately achieving enlightenment which is the real goal, so one can be of real benefit to others. So where I get that knowledge from, so once you have the knowledge about it, once you have that wisdom, then it's a question of developing it and meditating and just taking it to the point where it becomes so strong that gradually, progressively you're able to completely eliminate that ignorance and be completely free of suffering forever. Where that comes from is my teacher. Where that comes from is the people that I study with. Even if you don't actually discuss with them, everybody in the class is what makes that class take place. Like when I'm translating, I have to appreciate it. I don't mean like I'm obliged to, but there's no way but to appreciate everybody else in the class, because if they weren't there, I wouldn't be translating, and I wouldn't be getting this teaching kind of thing. So as a translator, so the key to your happiness is the people you study with, and the people you learn from, and the people that compose those texts, and the hard work that they went through to become the person who was able to write a text that you can learn so much from. When you think about Lama Tsongkhapa and so on, and when you think about the environment that your own study takes place in is, and your own practice takes place in, is these centers which were started up by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa. Then it's like, even if you don't receive a single teaching from Lama Zopa and you never met Lama Yeshe, they made this possible. They are also the key. That is so that's why I think that feeling of closeness and that kind of bond is possible also. It's the same thing, really. Yeah.